Ginger Johnson's life is one of the greatest untold stories of African music in Europe. He was born in Nigeria in 1916. Aged 18, he joined the Nigerian Navy and began to travel the world, visiting far-flung locations that allowed him to absorb several styles of music and percussion, including Latin, Afro Cuban, and jazz, with his amazing and unique approach on the talking drum becoming his recognized trademark sound. After emigrating to London in the 1940s, Ginger immediately made an impact on saxophone legend Ronnie Scott, who featured him in his live shows as well as on his albums for the Esquire record label. Ginger also performed with notable British jazz icons, including drummers Phil Seaman and Tony Crombie, pianist Victor Feldman, and featured on the recordings of Kenny Graham's Afro-Cubists.
Ginger Johnson is a very good musician for a start. Absolutely top. And then he crossed over. I mean, he's one of the first Africans to cross over hard from Africa into Brazil and Afro-Cuban, this and that.
In 1947, Johnson became the featured percussionist for the Edmundo Ros Orchestra, a legendary Latin band that played for high society London at esteemed establishments such as the Coconut Grove and the Cosmo Club in Soho. In the 50s, Ginger recorded for the pioneering Melodisc label under the name George Folurunsho Johnson and his Afro-Cuban band, were some of the first examples of African music professionally recorded in Britain. He became a linchpin of the African and Caribbean expat community, which included being a mentor to a young Fela Kuti when he first came to London to study in 1958. The Johnsons' family home in Pimlico became a hub of activity where all manner of musicians and friends would visit to exchange news, eat, and jam for hours on end.
Well, life in the house was quite hectic, really. Lots of boys running around. All our friends used to come in the house and play. Upstairs in the top room, that's where all the music went on, basically. Lots of people came. I mean, Eddie Grant used to come over to play drums with Dad. Shirley Bassey, Yossi Bisa. They'd be playing drums all day until they're ready to go for their gig.
By the mid-60s, for jazz, soul, and pop record producers, Ginger was the go-to session percussionist to book, making him the highest-profile Afro-Cuban percussionist in Europe. Ginger leveraged this popularity to appear in a range of mainstream British TV and iconic films, including James Bond, Live and Let Die, Hammer Films' Plague of the Zombies, and She, and also cult TV spy series Man in a Suitcase. Johnson was even invited to perform for the Queen at the Royal Variety Performance at the London Palladium. As a musical educator and social activist, Ginger was instrumental in helping establish the Notting Hill Carnival and turn it into the world-famous event it is today.
Go. And it was so close, the ending of the processions of the free school and the beginnings of the carnival, and it's a kind of grey area, that.
The London Free School was mainly, it was like an idea that seemed to grab the imagination of a lot of people. So, for instance, it was the crucible out of which the modern version of the carnival, the Notting Hill Carnival, came.
The key thing which came out of the London Free School was they decided to revive the Notting Hill Fair, which hadn't happened for over 100 years. And so this was a way of getting the community together in Notting Hill, and particularly of trying to overcome the racial prejudice in Notting Hill, because this is not long after the big race riots in Notting Hill. So they started the idea of a Notting Hill Street Festival, which grew and grew and grew over the years and has now become Carnival, the Notting Hill Festival, which is the biggest festival in Europe.
Ginger went to the carnival invited by Mrs. Lazarus, and it was a neighborhood festival, and this festival was so interesting. Ginger participated in it with so many musicians. Ginger also helped to find, to get a space in the carnival for young people, young family, for children. And that place was in front of the Tabernacle, which is called Power Square.
March 1967, Ginger and his African Messengers group entered Sound Technique Studio in Chelsea to record the African Party album. Produced by Ginger and engineered by John Wood, the vocals were sung in the Yoruba dialect. The album draws upon a wide range of influences, from African rhythms to American modern jazz vocals. Witch Doctor, where the song hinges upon the traditional healing rhythm, weaves a hypnotic backdrop, which was unlike anything heard before. This directly laid the foundation for what was to become known as Afrobeat. With Ginger's trademark talking drum leading from the front, these recordings sparkle with an energy and vitality that remains undiminished almost 60 years later.
I'm so happy to actually get my father's work back out into the open so people can hear this, old and new. The album really is the holy grail of Afrobeat, and Dad definitely is the godfather of Afrobeat.
The late 1960s saw Ginger and his group share stages and collaborate with an amazing variety of talent, from American jazz icons such as Art Blakey and Max Roach, through to British psychedelic groups such as Pink Floyd and Soft Machine at the International Times 14-hour Technicolor Dream, a somewhat chaotic psychedelic happening at Alexandra Palace. Ginger continued to blaze a genre-defying trail through the contemporary music scene with collaborations with free-thinking rock bands such as Argent, Thunderclap Newman, and in particular Little Free Rock, in the birth of the Afro-rock phenomenon. Ginger Johnson's most high-profile live engagement was performing with the Rolling Stones at the infamous Hyde Park gig in 1969, days after the death of Brian Jones, in front of a crowd estimated to be well in excess of 250,000 people. His specially assembled collective of percussionists provided the high-energy rhythmic bedrock of the infamous live version of Sympathy for the Devil.
Mick Jagger came to the house to see Dad often about African music, and I think most of those guys in those days had really never heard African music at that time, so obviously it was blowing their minds, and it was just the perfect thing to put into their band.
The gig was fantastic. I mean, we rehearsed with them, and Ginger played the talking drum, I played congas, and Johnny played the cabasa. Mick really loved it. You know, thought to say, yeah, it's going to happen now. I'm going to give you a whole minute to do that and this. And all the drummers, all the top drummers of that day were on stage. Reebok from Traffic, Lofty Amar from Osibisa, Tommy from Asadai, and then the African drummers from Ginger Johnson, you know, Bobby Caxton, from me, the Witch Doctor, and myself, Lord Eric.
1970, Johnson moved into the live entertainment world when he opened his own African-themed venue, the Iroko Country Club, in Haverstock Hill, North London.
Iroko housed so many bands from Africa, Jamaica, and America. One band that came to the club that stopped the traffic on Haverstock Hill, Funkadelic. They came, they got out the bus, and the way they were dressed, we were thought, wow, what kind of people is this? We are Funkadelic.
It was in 1975, whilst on a return trip to his Nigerian homeland, that Ginger fell ill. He suffered a heart attack and died on the 15th of July, aged just 59. This cut short one of the most vital and yet underappreciated careers of European-based African creativity. Aside from African Party and the 1950s Melodisc releases, it was thought that there were few, if any, other recordings by this hugely influential figure. However, in 2018, Dennis Johnson was contacted by the renowned African music collector Uchenna Ikone, who had discovered one battered original copy of an obscure 45 single, released in the early 70s on the short-lived Aphrodisia label. These tracks demonstrated a musical progression as the sound of funk had stamped its indelible footprint on Ginger's music, and have been added to the deluxe vinyl edition of African Party, available now on Impressive Collective and BBE Music. The amazing life and groundbreaking career of Ginger Johnson created the foundation of Afrobeat, and his direct and vital influence upon his undisputed figurehead, Fela Kuti, is just one part of a fascinating story only now being recognized for its ongoing and deeply relevant significance. His musical contributions and cultural legacy are finally getting the attention and accolades they deserve.
Up to now, we haven't been able to do a proper tribute to Ginger Johnson. He is a truly master, father. He's a leader. African Party, LP reissue is fantastic.
There's an absolutely brilliant collection of music by the percussionist Ginger Johnson and his African Messengers. There's just been issues on a label, Impressive Collective Music and Arts, additional tracks to a classic record, which was a big tune in all the parties and events and side rooms that I was talking about, where the dancers just take it on. And this track in particular, New York has its disco classics, we have our jazz dance classics, and that is certainly one of them. Talking Drum from Ginger Johnson and his African Messengers. It's interesting as well because he was a percussionist. He spent a lot of time coming over from, I think he was originally from Nigeria, came over and lived in Liverpool. Then he became the percussionist who played with people like Ronnie Scott and John Dankworth. Very involved in the community, building up the scene, really bringing another energy to a lot of the music that was going on at the time, and the beginnings of groups like Osabisa and all of that stuff, and involved in so many clubs, and was also one of the founder significant creators of the Notting Hill Carnival back in the day. So the guy is incredible. The album is incredible. African Party, Ginger Johnson, here on BBC Radio 6 Music.
Ajay.